Ready? Good. So, welcome back to everyone, and welcome to those who are maybe joining us for the first time, either here or online. We've been looking at the ways in which the Gospels show us Jesus entering into the work of silence and solitude, and how he wove that work into his life. And in the same way that we may come on retreat, come away to a lonely place like Bere Island, well, not so lonely, but a little bit withdrawn, or we work our 2 meditation sessions into our daily lives. So there are different ways in which we do this work, but the essential need for silence and solitude, for this contemplative dimension of life, is the same. So this morning, I thought we could look at this little passage from the Gospel of Luke. Where Jesus is shown doing almost his daily work. He was known, his reputation grew as a healer. So if you set yourself up as a healer, other people are going to come to you, because healers, whether it's physical or psychological, are much in demand. He was once in a certain town where there happened to be a man covered with leprosy. Seeing Jesus, he bowed to the ground and begged his help. "Sir," he said, "if only you will, you can cleanse me." Jesus stretched out his hand, touched him. Unusual to touch in his time to touch a leper. He touched him and said, "Indeed I will, I do want to do this, be clean again." The leprosy left him immediately. Jesus then ordered him not to tell anybody. He didn't want to develop a reputation or to be seen only as a miracle worker. "But go," he said, "show yourself to the priest and make the offering laid down by Moses for your cleansing, and that will certify the cure." So having leprosy meant this man was excluded from the village or from common life. So he was outcast. So the first part of the story, you could say, is the cure. He cures the leprosy. But in the second section, where he tells the man to go and fill out the forms and get himself approved again by the priest, he's healing. He's continuing the cure so that the person can be reintegrated into society, into community, and to pick up his life again. The purpose of the cure is to allow the sick person to live again as fully as possible. In the National Health Service in the United Kingdom at the moment, there's a big crisis. And the crisis seems to be not only the numbers of people and the lack of resources, the underfunding, but too many people coming to the hospital, and elderly people especially now, who get looked after in the hospital, but then there's no care for them at home. The whole caring work, the home care that needs to be done to help them settle back in and convalesce and give them what they need, that's being underfunded. Despite a huge amount of wealth being created in other parts of society, there's not enough money to look after poor old people at home, and health and care workers are having to leave the profession in large numbers. So The curing in the hospital is only one part of it. The other is helping the person to settle back into their life and be healed, be made whole again. And we're not whole until we find our place in our community. So, Jesus is concerned, as part of the healing work, that the man should be reintegrated into society. But the talk about him spread all the more. So, as people didn't keep quiet, as he asked them to do, and great crowds gathered to hear him and to be cured of their ailments. And from time to time, he would withdraw to solitary places to pray. So again, we're reminded, and as we are several times, especially in the Gospel of Luke, that this was just part of his routine. This wasn't only due to an exceptional crisis, like the death of John the Baptist or other examples we've looked at, but it was just part of his working life that he took time to go away and pray in a quiet and solitary and silent place. Some years ago, I got a letter from a nurse who was working in a refugee camp, and she was on her own, pretty much, in this little clinic that she was running, and she was writing to me. She said, we've been having shells have been dropping in parts of the camp today. They were under attack by somebody. And so she said, it's been a long day. Got up at 6 and opened my door, and there's been a line there all day. And I've just closed the door and am going to meditate. The people were still lining up. And it's hard for her, as a nurse, as a healer, as a carer, to close the door on people. Where do you draw the line? Everyone's going to say, just me, just let me in. And but she closed the door and was going to have something to eat and meditate. So she knew, as Jesus knew, as we all know, that if we don't take this time, not only for physical rest and to look after ourselves psychologically and physically, but also spiritually, then our work suffers. And however well-intentioned we are, however generous we may be, everyone has a limit. Everybody will burn out. And burnout doesn't only mean that you end up rolling around on the floor or sitting in a corner crying. It can also mean that you, to all intents and purposes, you're carrying on fairly normally, externally, but interiorly you're beginning to shut down, and you're detaching yourself in a negative sense from the people and the work around you. It's an interior withdrawal, but a negative withdrawal. And so the quality of your relationship, the quality of your work, the quality of how you interact with people begins to decline. Jesus, on another occasion, when the woman with the hemorrhage touched him, felt power go out of him. Felt energy go out of him. It takes it out of you to heal. It was a work he felt, he had the compassion in him was just involuntary. It wasn't a choice he made so much. Like the Good Samaritan, he didn't think about whether he should pick up the wounded man. He just did it because he saw the need and he responded intuitively, like the policeman who jumped over the side of a bridge when he saw a woman who was trying to commit suicide, had jumped into the water, and he just jumped out of his car and jumped over the bridge to rescue her, which he did. When he was asked later, that was very brave of you to do that, very courageous, you're a great hero. And he said, well, actually, I never thought of it. I never thought about it. I just did it. It just seemed to be the immediate natural thing to do. So nevertheless, although it has, compassion flows naturally if our hearts are open and we have any measure of health in ourselves, nevertheless, it takes it out of you. Any kind of work takes it out of you. And so it needs to be, humanly speaking, needs to be renewed, to be re-energized, to be recharged. To give to others requires, if it's to be sustainable, it requires that we love ourselves, that we give ourselves and our own human needs the right kind of attention and the right kind of time. And it's interesting how we see in the monastic literature how psychologically aware they were of this need for balance. They saw two dangers, or what in life, in our attitude to our work. One was laziness, just being too lazy and giving up before you get started, and just not even trying, sort of passive giving up on the one hand, and on the other hand, overdoing it, being too zealous and trying to give too much without a break. I met a prisoner once who was a bit of an example of that. He used to come to the meditation group in the prison, but some of the others said to me they thought he was not very well psychologically, because he was going to absolutely everything that was on offer in the courses or things being done in the prison, and throwing himself into them all without any sort of measure or prudence, and overdoing all these spiritual things, or yoga and everything else. And basically he was trying to escape from the prison rather than to accept the fact that he was in prison. He wanted to create this other world into which he could mentally, psychologically escape. And sadly, he had a breakdown and had to was taken away to the psychiatric unit. So, on the one hand, we don't even try because we think we won't be able to do it, or we just don't have the energy. On the other hand, we overdo it and we try too hard. It's the same with the mantra. When you say the mantra, for some people it might seem too much work. I don't like to say the mantra because I just like to sit there in the presence of God, which that might be right for them. One can't judge other people, but it might also mean that you're basically just sitting there in what John Cassian called the sopor letalis, the lethal sleep. So kind of a holy drowsiness. The Buddhists just describe this as, I forget what the phrase is, but it's basically where your mental state is just drowsy. You're half awake, half asleep, and it's pleasant enough, but you're not actually doing any work. You're just sort of drifting on a river on a warm afternoon and taking a little snack every so often. So, that's one approach to meditation, that we don't think it should be work. We don't want it to be work. We see it just as a time of relaxation and immediate relaxation, not peace. Peace is a little different from relaxed. If you say, I'm feeling very relaxed, it's not quite the same as when you say, I'm feeling at peace. And peace is usually something that you have had to work at. Peace is the result of some resolution of conflict rather than just chilling out. So that's one extreme. The other extreme would be that you are going to batter at the doors of heaven and go for enlightenment if it kills you, and you see it only in terms of your own effort, and it's going to be your achievement. So you sit there using the mantra as if it were a jackhammer, trying to get through concrete. So either extreme really fails, and we have to learn from the mistakes we make in order to get to the right balance. And part of that learning is learning with and from other people. So health is, in most cultures, seen as a balance of the different forces or elements or chemistries of the body and the mind. Health is not a idealistic state. It's a dynamic balance which is always needing to be rebalanced to some degree. And spiritually speaking, the balance is between grace and effort, between the work that is done in us by the Spirit and the work we have to do to allow this work to be done. St. Teresa says, all we can do at the time of prayer is to be ready, is to dispose ourselves. But to be ready involves some work on our part. So a healthy life, a healthy spiritual life, is a prerequisite of a healthy social, psychological life, personal life. We can't be healthy in one part of our life without being unhealthy in others. We can't be unhealthy in one part of our life without being unhealthy in others. The balance is a balance of integrated forces. We can't separate the body, the mind, and the spirit. They are distinct, so they have different needs, but we can't just separate them. So we need to find a balance between contemplation and action if we are to be healthy living, to have a healthy way of living. Lifestyle issues today are very important for people and often related to general ideas of spirituality. So if you open the Saturday newspapers, you'll nearly always see a lifestyle section which addresses this concern that many people have in our society about finding the right way of living, or finding, whether it's diet or whether it's exercise or whether it's how much time you spend working and so on. Looking at all of these techniques or pieces of advice or methodologies to make your life better, much of it is just abstract because you read, about living a balanced and healthy life, but then you close the newspaper and go back to your unhealthy eating or unhealthy food, unhealthy lifestyle. So what is usually lacking in these lifestyle spiritualities is a truly spiritual dimension, by which we mean a spiritual dimension is that dimension of us where we can work, but where we are not attached to the fruits of our labors, as we were saying yesterday, where we work, but we're not measuring the results, where we're practicing something as a discipline rather than just as a technique. Saint Benedict and the writing in the generation or two after the Desert Fathers peaked formulates this as a balance of life that has come down the ages and is still helping many people in all walks of life, and as well as teams of people and workforces, to understand how life can be lived healthily, satisfactorily, by integrating these three dimensions of physical, mental, and spiritual. So he divides the day into different activities. And they are the time given to manual work. For him, mostly it was manual work, but not always manual work. And the time given to reading, which he insisted was an important part of the life, even for the monks who didn't want to read. He said, you've got to keep your minds open and alert. For him it was primarily, of course, spiritual reading and prayer. Both prayer in common, which is where he places most of his emphasis in organizing the schedule, but also clearly aware of the importance of personal prayer, of the prayer of the heart. And remember, he sees the monastic life in this formula as a preparation for deeper solitude, whether that solitude is physical or interior. So it's a little rule for beginners. This is very basic, getting your life together. Thomas Merton said that when novices came to his monastery, this was back in the 50s, 60s, he said, there's not much point in talking to them about the spiritual life and about, introducing them to the great contemplative texts. He said, as long as they're addicted to television. And he said most of them who come, this was in the 50s, now it would be internet, of course, but he said they're still in withdrawal from that culture. So there's a preparation necessary even before we start to get our life together, before we have to identify the excesses, the addictions, the problematical patterns in our life. We have to identify them and say, I've got to sort that out. And there's no point in pretending that I'm going to be able to meditate twice a day or do some reading every day if I'm spending 5 hours on Facebook. So it's in a way it comes down to time management, and that's often how Benedict is appreciated by people in business or in the secular world. So these are the three elements, and when we're on retreat, as we are here this week, we're able to look at those elements a little bit more clearly and to see how we're using our time, the time we spend in meditation and in other ways of prayer, the time we spend when maybe we're not. I mean, one good manual work you could do is when you're out walking and you see, this is supposed to be the tidiest island in Ireland, but it's not perfectly tidy. So if you see something on the ground, it's incredible. What did I see yesterday? I remember it was a can, a Coke can. Cane. What?
It was a cane.
Okay, yeah, okay. So, pick it up, put it in your bag and throw it over somebody else's garden. No. Pick it up and take it back and put it in the garbage. I mean, it's a good little social work for the common good, or just walking is a kind of a manual work as well. Or the work you're doing, if you're doing the washing up or the cleaning in your house or wherever you're staying. So, in some way, see that your the physical part of your being here, whether it's working or walking, can be done in a prayerful way. And similarly, the time spent in reading. And just to be able to focus on that a little more consciously in a time of retreat is beneficial to us, because when we go back to ordinary schedules, ordinary life, we'll be that much more aware of the need for this balance and of any areas of imbalance or excess or compulsiveness. There's a important difference between Buddhist and Benedictine Christian monasticism and over the question of work, of manual work. In the Buddhist monastic life, the monks are not supposed to work at all. And it's the lay people who are meant to look after them. So traditionally the monks go out with their begging bowl every morning in the village, and the people put in food, and the people are happy to do it because they feel this brings them benefit, merit. To feed the monks is a good thing to do for them and their children. So in that kind of society, there's this collaboration, and the monks, of course, do their thing for others as well, particularly helping the dying and education and other kinds of social work very often. So, and don't do it for profit. So it's a kind of ideal society, so social balance, which of course doesn't work so well in a big city. But the monks themselves are not supposed to work, whereas for Benedict, they are supposed to work. And they're supposed to support themselves, by whatever means, appropriate means, probably not by arms trading or drug dealing, but by maybe running a farm or running a school or a parish even, or teaching, or running a retreat center, or teaching meditation. These are, good ways and acceptable ways of supporting yourself as a monastic or contemplative community. And because in the Christian monastic world, work was regarded as necessary, there was also the same danger of overwork. So there's this interesting little story from Cassian, from the Desert Fathers, to show that even monks can overdo it. This is from the 9th conference. One of the elders, one of the older monks, happened to pass by the cell of a certain brother who was suffering under this sickness of mind that we have spoken about, and it's the sickness of imbalance. He sees this as a mental illness, actually. This man, the certain brother, was restlessly constructing and repairing unnecessary things and exerting himself in mundane distractions. Right? So he was just breathlessly running around fixing things and then deconstructing them and then reconstructing them. From a distance, he noticed that this monk was pounding a very hard rock with a sledgehammer. And he saw a certain Ethiopian standing by him and striking hammer blows along with him, their hands joined together. So the monk was hitting this stone with the help of this other figure. And he was urging him on, this Ethiopian was urging him on in this work with fiery brand. So really urging him to work harder. He stayed there for quite a while, astonished at the sight of this cruel demon. So the Ethiopian is the demon of overwork, and at the deceptive power of such an illusion. So this monk was under an illusion that he was doing good work, meaningful work, and he was just uselessly hammering, pounding a rock. I was struck by this when talking to one of the MBA students who was on the meditation and leadership course recently, and he, highly disciplined person, and was meditating twice a day for the whole of the 6 weeks, actually. And he said, this has been a great discovery for me. It's going to be really useful, especially when I go to New York after I finish my MBA, and I'll be working 13 hours a day. That's how, in the office they were, he said, and more if necessary. So, of course, he was quite excited by that, because he's probably going to be paid quite well for it. But, hopefully the meditation will at least keep him in some balance. So the older monk, was astonished at the sight of this cruel demon and at the deceptive power of such an illusion. For when the brother was completely worn out and wanted to rest and put an end to his work, he was encouraged at this demon's instigation, and who forced him to take up his hammer again and keep bashing away at this boulder. So that he didn't see, he says he did not feel how burdensome all his effort was. So he didn't even realize the damage it was doing to him. So he wouldn't realize that he was burning himself out, he was destroying himself, until at some point he would crack. At last the old man, greatly upset by the demon's cruel mockery. So he's looking, this is the psychological equivalent to this. You're living with someone, or you know someone who's overdoing it, and they can't see it. And they don't know how much damage they're doing to themselves, and probably to their family, or whatever, to their quality of work, or whatever it may be. They can't see it. They're under this illusion that they are, doing great work. So the old man, greatly upset by this, goes up to the brother's cell, greets him and says, "What are you working at, brother?" And he said, "We are toiling away at this very hard rock, and we've hardly been able to break it up at all." To this the old man said, "So it's good that you said we, because you were not alone when you were striking it, but there was another with you whom you did not see." But he wasn't able to see this compulsion in himself. "He stood by you during this work, not so much to help you as to press you on with all his force." So this was the the younger monks' liberation from overwork. So, what we see here is the importance of other people in our life. People who can see if and when we're going in the wrong direction and who can pull us back. Sometimes just by being with them, and this is enough to remind us, but sometimes you need an intervention. Sometimes they need to sit you down or talk with you about it. So the relationships of the monks in the desert, and we can see even in the life, in those examples of Jesus, in his life, a busy life with other people, a life full of relationships, full of working at this group of 12 apostles that he had selected. So his time in solitude and silence was woven in to his work with the relationships of his life, and his work of healing, and his work of building and teaching this group of people who he hoped would take forward his message. So the inner work that we do needs to be in harmony with the outer work of our lives. We need this outer work. We need to find good work, work that we believe in, work that allows us to serve others, work that is creative for us, not deadening, not mechanical, work that gives dignity to our life, whatever it may be. And it will be different for different people. But so we need very much to find our work. What is the work we are called to do? I met somebody once who had had a near-death experience, and he emerged from it with this awareness, he had lost the fear of death, for one thing, but he also was a bit anxious because he said, I know I was given my life back, and I was sent back in order to find the work I had to do. And he said, I'm not sure what that work is. So he was thinking primarily in terms of external work. What kind of job should he do? What kind of profession should he do? And that is, of course, important, because that will give us, we can't, not everyone is meant to be a brain surgeon, not everybody is meant to be a street cleaner. But if you're, if sweeping the streets is your work, then do it with pride and dignity and do it well. We have to find the particular work that allows us to use our talents and to put our talents, invest them and see it as a work of meaning because it serves others. But perhaps what he hadn't fully appreciated yet was that this work that he was meant to be looking for was also an inner work. And I don't think we can really separate the two. The inner work, finding oneself, the work of contemplation, the work of stillness, the work of silence. It takes up less time than the time you may spend in the office or cleaning the streets, but they are complementary. The outer work, the big question is, do you see the outer work as primary or secondary? It isn't that they're not both necessary, both important, but one is primary, the other is secondary. And of course, in our culture, the outer work is primary. That's how we identify ourselves, justify ourselves, see ourselves in terms of our outward work. But it's like the story of Martha and Mary. And Jesus says to Martha, Mary has chosen the better part. He's not saying that Martha isn't doing good work by whichever she was doing in the kitchen, but that being comes before doing. Contemplation is the source of good work, work that can be sustainable, work that is healthy, work that doesn't lead us into compulsiveness or burnout or addiction. And this is why, in order to emphasize this, St. Benedict says, the goods of the monastery, the products of the monastery, should be sold at a little less than the market rate. Not sure how many monasteries would do that. And they make soap and tonic wine and things. But anyway, that's Benedict's advice. And the point of it is to remind you that this work is important, but it's secondary. And in the same way, in the desert tradition, they said, the monks shouldn't haggle over prices. Because they would sell whatever they were making, mats or other things, or they would sell their labor. They would go out and work in the fields during harvest time. So they would sell themselves or their work products, but they wouldn't haggle too much over the prices, probably. So, and if we get the balance right, if we see the primary value of the inner work, the outer work becomes a great deal less burdensome. And you will not be trapped into that compulsive overwork of the monk in that story. And then you come to see what they called the achievement of working with Christ. And any work we do, the inner work or the outer work, and the balance between the two, when it's healthy, it is understood, the meaning of it is that we are working with Christ in the world and in our own interior work. So let's take our time to do that inner work now. Again, just take a moment to it's good. So loosen up your shoulders. Stretch a little. You can do that in the chair. Let's take that moment, a few moments, to bring the body back into the picture, and the body and the mind to come into harmony. So the body can anchor the mind in the present moment. Just take a few moments to be aware of your breath. Close your eyes lightly. Relax the muscles of your face, your forehead, your jaw, your shoulders. And then silently, in stillness, in our mind and heart, we begin the work of the mantra, to say the word gently, faithfully, continuously returning to it, letting go of thoughts of the past or the future, anxieties or fantasies. Returning to the word simply, attentively, and faithfully.